Are you still struggling to have home and work integration? Or maybe you have some integration, but you still feel like a stranger in your own home. Well, today we're going to be discussing how to treat your wife like a business deal. Now, hold on before you go anywhere. I know I'm talking to high performers and entrepreneurs. And so we're going to be jumping in with a very special guest today by what I mean by treating your wife like a business deal. So my boy Jake is with me, and Jake, how are you, brother?
I am so good.
You ready? You ready to jump into this topic today?
I'm super excited. Yeah. And that'll be
So,
good.
dude, so I just kind of came up with this. What do you get from this thought of treating your wife like a business deal, or as a real estate investor, treating her as a seller?
Treating her as a seller. I don't know. I think I agree with like parts of it, but then there's a lot of it that I think I disagree with.
That's
Because I yeah, because for me, so when I'm talking to a seller, it's because I have a goal and initiative in place that I'm trying to accomplish and hopefully align our goals to make that happen. Whereas with my wife, I think the difference is that we're trying to find the spot at which we both agree. And sometimes that means one of us gives up in order for the other person to like be happy, right? And so sometimes there's compromise that's made. And I'm call me a hard negotiator, but I'm not great at compromising with sellers. so,
mm.
so I think that's the only part that I'm like sitting here. I'm like, I don't know, but I'm curious to see where you want to go with it. I think it's
I mean, I thought you did a phenomenal job of explaining exactly what we try to do with a seller, right? We want to get gain something from them. We have an initiative, and let's kind of break that down where we typically would say, I think one of the first principles or things that you need when you speak to a seller is their motivation,
yep.
right? And I think in the same way, one of the reasons why most husbands do not get what they want and have great work life integration is because they simply don't understand their wife's motivation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think a lot of it goes back to really clear communication, which is when we do talk about sales and negotiations and stuff like that. I think so much of it comes back to, are you clearly communicating, and are you communicating not just like the superficial question you're asking, but your intents and your purposes and stuff like that. And the most effective communicators, they're able to relay their thoughts and their mindset and their objectives clearly through that process, so that the other person isn't left wondering what it looks like on the back end. And so
Mm-hmm.
I can see how, yeah, I could see how that part relates. Like, because with my wife, a lot of the time, we even just had this talk the other day, talking about like some ideas for Christmas gifts and stuff coming up around the corner, and talking about, hey, I think this could be really cool, or we could talk about something like this, or you know what I mean? And the reason why for each of them, I think it goes a really long way.
Exactly. And a lot of guys or people that I speak to, they oftentimes run into a brick wall because they just don't know how to communicate or even understand the other person's point of view or what they
Yeah.
desire. It's always kind of like their own, right? So they're running in, and then when they try to get the deal closed and they get shut down, the second part to getting a deal is follow up, because you typically get a no the first time, or you may, right? But we have a hard time following up family members because we take it as an offense. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think, well, and I think the other thing too is that sometimes we get afraid of conflict,
Yeah.
and we fear the idea of bringing up something that maybe they're not going to like, and so sometimes we can be super anti-confrontational, which I don't think is healthy either. Especially, I'm talking about now in a relationship. But I think it's making sure to clarify those things up front and saying, hey, this is where I feel strongly. But then it kind of goes back to my point earlier too, is I think that it comes down to the element of there is compromise in a different way, I think, sometimes in the relationship than there might be in a deal, right? But I'll share something actually that I think maybe it kind of feeds into this. So a long time ago, when I was first getting married, we've been married now. We're actually coming up on 11 years.
Nice.
Uh, and so one of the pieces of advice I received a long time ago was a gentleman. He was talking to me and he said, what are the three most important words you can say to your spouse? Which everybody by default is going to defer to. I love you or something like that, right? That's where you feel. And so that's what I said. I said, I love you. And he goes, nope. He goes, you're wrong. And he said, the three most important words you can ever say in a marriage is you're probably right. And he said, because when you say you're probably right, it means that you're not forfeiting your goals and objectives, but you're saying I care more about you right now than I do the problem that's at hand. And so I'm willing to forfeit my goals and objectives for right now because I care about you. And so I think that's, to me, the part where you're right. It's about sometimes there's conflict and stuff like that you talk through, but then it's coming to that compromise of, hey, what's more important in the moment and how do we weigh the priority? So.
Man, I absolutely love that. And why do you think eating the frog is so hard in relationships? Because my personality and this probably comes from going through a divorce in the past where I think a lot of it you could have a conversation, but we kind of shy away from having a conversation. And a divorce never just happens the day it happens, it happens from a long buildup. And
Yeah.
so, why do you think most people shy away from having that conversation to deal with the thing that they're actually feeling on the inside?
I don't know. Um, I don't know if I have a good answer for you on that one. I think that I'm going to throw a thought out there, and I may be totally wrong. And so I don't know, but I'm curious. Like for the sake of conversation,
Yeah.
my my first initial reaction is I think it's pride.
Mm.
I think that I think sometimes we're so afraid of the conflict, not because I think we're afraid of the idea that we could be wrong. And so we're so stuck in I'm right now and I'm just not going to listen to anything else because there's this idea of I can't be wrong and I don't want to be wrong. Um, and so I think sometimes we get stuck in this like pride cycle of just like stuck in ourselves and what we care about the most and then not humbling ourselves enough to listen to a different point of view.
Yeah.
Which I mean, you and I talk a lot, Keston. So I know you're a very humble, honest guy and pretty cool. So, and again, I don't know. This may be totally wrong, but I'm throwing this out there, and that's my only thought that I can think of right off the bat would be something like that. Like maybe it's that stuck on an idea and not willing to forfeit it.
No, I think that has a lot of credibility and validity to it because nobody wants to go through the feeling of feeling vulnerable, essentially, right? Because if you're wrong, you feel vulnerable because now the other person has control. And if you're like just risking that, putting your that feeling of vulnerability out there, I think is like nobody wants to deal with that feeling, of
Yeah.
uncertainty, vulnerability, and this is where a lot of times, even when I have some of these conversations with my wife, one of the things I try to do when my ego isn't in full control is to is to just touch her.
Yeah.
Because if I am able to just lay my hands on her knee, lay my hands, or just say, hey, we're a team, it diffuses the the thought of having to win or having to. Yeah, I think it's really having to win because the winning keeps you safe, right? It keeps you vulnerable, and
Yep.
so it's but So that's on the relationship side. Now, if we were to go back to this whole thought of treating your marriage like a business deal or like a seller, why do you go back
Yeah.
to the seller? You do that without thought, right? Well, some people have some resistance and they may not follow up or whatever, but you and we're gonna follow up. Why is that a lot easier in the follow up with the seller?
Um, oh, wait, well, I see what you're saying. So when you say follow up in the relationship, what are you referring to?
So you might be
Like,
avoiding a conversation. You might be
okay.
avoiding um, just you know that the goal is to become entrepreneurs. Let's say, right? We're nine to fivers. I want to become an entrepreneur. I've been trying to pitch this idea of pursuing real estate or something to my spouse. They're like, that's not my mindset, blah, blah, blah. And so we start
Yeah.
thinking like, I'm gonna just do it on my own. Like, and because people start to, what's the right word? What's the right word? Not condemn. They start to look down on their partners in ways that is just not sexy, it's not healthy, it's not anything. And so when this resentment starts to build, they feel like their partner is keeping back their life, and they even talk about leaving their partner if they don't get on board.
Hmm.
But we'd follow up with a seller, have the conversation
Mhm.
multiple times to be able to get the deal closed.
Yeah. I think so. I'm thinking now about like my personal experience. And I think in my personal experience, every once in a while, sometimes I avoid we'll call it follow up or like the circling back to the conversation and like conflict resolution or whatever that may be. Sometimes because I'm uh, I think sometimes like we get caught up in the like let's just move on and forget it. It's part of the past. I don't want to bring it back up because I don't want to bring up like fresh dirt to like cause a problem. Whereas with the seller, I really just don't care because my objective is purely I need to get the deal closed because again, my priority is now feed my family, right? And so it's like, well, worst case scenario, this is a short term relationship. So if they if they get really pissed with me, then all right, well that stinks. But you know what? I move on. It's not a long lasting relationship. And I think
So,
sometimes when it comes to the family and the spouse, there's the concern of is this going to cause something that becomes lasting, that becomes like a wedge?
man, it's so good that you brought up the point of you're after a specific goal. Do we not have a specific goal for our family to get us both to the promised land? Right? Is that not a goal? And this path that we're taking is a means towards that goal. So essentially, when we don't follow up, we're saying no to the goal because we don't want to deal with the emotion.
Yes. Well, we do have goals, right? But to me, the goals are different because on a call, if I'm on a seller's call, my objective is super crystal clear, and there's like one outcome. I think that's the difference. There's one outcome I'm looking for, right?
Pause
Where
right there. Pause. Pause.
okay,
Do you not have one outcome that you want for your family?
I think I have one macro outcome, right? So if we talk about like, I'm a pretty religious person, and I know you are too.
Yeah.
And so if we talk about like religion, right, it's like very much eternal life and living with God and exaltation and all that other stuff post this life, like living with God again kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so macroly, yes. However, on a micro scale, when it comes down to the conversation, I think that that's where sometimes those conversations get a little more diluted because now it's like if you're on a hike, right? If you're on a hike, you start at the base of the mountain. There's 15 different ways to possibly try to climb the mountain, but it's trying to figure out which hike are we trying to take? And I
Mhm.
think that's where the deviation happens. The goal outcome in the end is still the same, but sometimes we can take little splinters off and take different paths to get there, which I think is a lot of life. Is like figuring out what our path is to get there. But then at the same time, and this is where I would argue slightly different, is with a seller, which I will argue there's different ways to get to a negotiation with a seller, right? That does exist,
Yeah.
but to me, it's a shorter hike, and so it's like if I deviate off the path, it's a lot clearer faster. Does that make sense? Because I'm like, yep, well, the seller's not responding well to that one. Or, hey, like this asking price is way too high. I'm not going to be able to get there, right? Like, so how are we going to pivot? And so I think the concern, and I kind of brought this up earlier, but I think the concern for the longevity of impact of that, and then the timeline, like macro versus micro, as far as like the decisions that are being made. That's the things I'll throw that out there. So.
No, I like that, and I think that's really good. I still see it as the same. I,
Okay.
s- I still see it as the same because if it is, my vision for my family is here, right? We got my vision for me, my vision for my wife, my vision for us, right? And we're going here, then every decision that I make or conversation that I don't have, it's either helping or keeping us from getting there. And so it's
Yeah.
for me, having a tough conversation and eating the frog is being sub to the mission. So there's a sub to the mission where I'm submitting to the entire mission and not just my emotions. And so I rather go through the emotional wreck or trauma, whatever that might be, in having a conversation. I rather go through that so that we're back going on the same path than keeping inside all of the emotions that then deviates us on all the other paths. And now instead of getting there in 2 years, we're now going to take the longer path and get there in 10 because we took a detour, right? And it's not that we
Mhm.
don't know that we should have these conversations, we choose not to have them.
So let me ask you a question.
Yep.
Do you believe that there's ever a possibility of by having the conversation and causing more harm than having let it pass?
Would you do that on a deal?
Yeah.
And when you do it on a deal, what happens?
Well, it depends, but sometimes yes. Sometimes you leave things as they are, right? You just run with it
Yeah.
because things are moving along, or they've progressed, or they're I mean, we're past that point, and you leave it out.
But you would try to the very wit's end until you totally screwed it up. Like you're like, dang, I totally screwed this deal up. No?
I Wait, maybe we're thinking about slightly different things. Because the thing that I'm thinking about is like, for example, let's say that you guys have like a disagreement, right? And you're coming back, conflict resolution, right? You circle back to it, you're like, hey, we're really heated right now. Let's, like my wife and I, we have like a safe word. It's like, hey, at some point, if we're just like really in the moment, we just need a breather. We have a word that we throw out there that it's like, all right, we're like, we just need a break, give each other space. It's no offense towards one another. It's like, we'll circle back to this later. Every once in a while, though, we don't actually circle back to it because we just kind of move on and it's done, right? And it's like, all right, we get it. Like we move on. It's past. Like there's no point in bringing it up because we both, I think, acknowledge and accept it. So that's what I'm thinking of right now. Because there's times also with sellers where sellers have an objection or they have a concern or something like that, and then we start talking about other things, and I don't come back and re-earth it back up because we've moved on and it's not relevant anymore. That's what I was thinking of, and maybe we were talking about something different,
Yeah.
but
So is it actually not relevant or is it swept under the rug?
probably a little bit both.
Right. So for me, I'm gonna have the conversation at some other point, because if I'm thinking about it, I want to address it,
Okay.
right? Because it's the only way to the clear path of no resentment,
Okay.
right? So if, but it depends on the type of relationship people want. And so for
Yeah.
me, I would tell a seller, or like, the point that I'm making is we will do almost anything to get to that point of getting the deal closed. We'll have the tough conversations. We will follow up. We would understand the timeline. We would do all of those things to get a deal closed, but we'll shut down for our families. We'll sweep it under the rug. We'll just be like,
All right. I don't. Yeah. I'm following what you're saying. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but I think I'm following along.
but
So
it's hard to refute though, because if we have the same mindset, if we have the same pursuit, I believe we'd have happier homes, because like we literally do not, we put people in a follow-up sequence even a year out.
yeah, yeah. I think I think one of the differences for me is that just because we have a difference in opinion and we sometimes have conflicts, I don't think that always results in or means that we have differing goals or objectives. So I think our objectives can be the same, but we sometimes argue over which path is, like going back to the hiking analogy,
Sure.
right? Sometimes it's this is going to be the better path here, this one's. And sometimes that's where I go, oh, you're probably right. Or she'll say, my wife will say it too. She'll say, you're probably right. And we figure it out. So,
Yeah. No, I think that's a part of just navigation.
yeah.
How would I compare that to a seller? I don't know. Like I don't have the direct correlation to, because like, yeah, I don't have the direct correlation as to how I would tie those two up right there. But
Yeah.
I could totally see and understand why the us agreeing, or agreeing to disagree on a path is fine, right? Like it doesn't mean that we're enemies. It means that we have come to an agreement that
Yeah.
I don't agree with your way, but I'm going to support you, right?
Yeah.
Through
Yeah.
that decision, and so we have those a bunch, but the main factor is that, and the point in kind of setting up the conversation in that way is because if we, even going out, zooming out even more, if we treated our family like we do our business, we'd have better family lives. Understanding your relationship KPIs, like just a better family life altogether. And the frame works for entrepreneurs, right? Most
Yeah.
people, it may not work for most people, but if we were to ask most men, hey, what's your relationship KPI? They'd be like, the hell? I don't know. All right. Like, but then it makes you think, shoot, what are those specific measurements or things I need to focus on to move the needle forward? That's a
Yeah.
You're
I know
thinking.
you. Yeah. Well, and I was trying to remember because I know you and I have kind of talked about this a little bit before, but remind me, what are the KPIs that you guys set with you and Jasmine?
I mean, we have a bunch, because the ones that are more particular for her, and then there are ones that's more particular for me. And so we
Yeah.
go through, like, one would be, let's say, in the area of security. In the
Okay.
area of security, what's your cup? Where are you at in give a
Yeah.
number, right? And so woman desires to feel secure. That's one of their things, and just wanting to have that level of security. So for her, that might be a KPI that is higher up than for me, because I'm winging it is what I do. So that level of security is just not as important for me, right? And so if she focuses on that, where and the reason why this is important is because if we continue to speak in or focus on the wrong KPIs, just like in our business, if we focus on something that's not moving the needle forward, then we're really just procrastinating. It's like, bro, did you really have to build that dashboard? Like, how are you moving the needle forward by building that dashboard versus doing outreach? You know?
Yeah.
So understanding like some of those, and I think for everyone it would be different.
Yeah.
And I just love being a student of my wife because I think it changes over time. Like, we just had our baby, and there are things now that's a little bit different for her.
Hmm. I think, yeah, I like what you said there too, a student of your wife, which I think that's really cool because I think one of the things I've learned is life, I think, is very much a life or path of progression, right? We talk about this in business. Your business never stays still, right?
Hmm.
It's always either progressing or it's digressing. And I think marriage and just in general life is very much the same way. Um, I think it is either progressing or it's digressing. It's very rarely ever one
Yeah.
or both, right? So, um, yeah, I think that's really cool. So I love the whole idea of like student of your wife kind of thing, which I think part of it is learning what they care about, right? So I mean, there's stuff that I'm like the other day I was talking to my wife and it's fun. This is like a stupid example, but I know this is, and people are going to laugh at me. I had never really eaten chicken wings. I know, stupid example, but never had chicken wings for like most of my childhood. I don't know why. Like we had all the parts of a chicken, but we never had wings at all. Never had that. My wife, when we were dating, she used to talk about how she loved going to some like certain restaurants and eating like the spicy wings and doing the contest to like see if she could like eat the spicy wings and get her like picture of the. I don't know. It was like a thing that she was like really proud of that she ate the really spicy, like the bowl of spicy wings. So for some reason, I made the assumption that she really liked wings. Well, it turns out the other day we were talking, she doesn't even like wings. Like we started like cooking wings every once in a while, like we'll grill them up or something. And she told me that she's like, yeah, I really don't care for wings. And I was like, what are you talking about? This whole time we started eating wings because I thought you liked them. And so there's little things that we're learning all the time, right? And so I had tried to do something because I thought she cared about it, but turns out I was wrong. I made an assumption and I was incorrect. So
Yeah, that's I think like that's actually a great example. Because I think it's a lot of those little things that we continuously to be true, or it wasn't true at all, right? I think I'm picking up, am
mhm.
I?
It glitched for me for a second, and I don't know if it was my internet or yours, but I got most of what you were saying. Yeah.
Okay. Um, but that learning and relearning is so important because something really similar. I remember we were driving in the car like about two weeks ago, and my wife was like, "Oh my God, I would love to buy a house on this street." And I'm like, "Really? You always say you don't like to be on the main streets. I would have never thought." Well, this one, and I'm like, see why I just gotta continue to be open to like and just not never really assume. I can have a good idea, but the assumption like 100%, I just feel like I love staying open to that. Um, because I think we're ever changing, ever like in that pursuit. So in wrapping up, man, you know, one of the reasons why this thought and perspective and just kind of conversation is coming up for me because I'm continuously looking for better ways, easier ways to help my men pursue their wives, pursue their family, and having an analogy or something that works is better than one that does not work, because maybe one day something clicks and it's like, oh, I could do that, right? Like something just so simple and so silly makes them be in the pursuit. And if they were to only look at it in the way that we've been taught and trained, nobody really taught us how to be married, right? Like, and so there was no schooling, there was no tests. We could go to Vegas and, get married drunk with two witnesses who are hungover, and walk out with a license essentially. So, like, just trying to give tools, tips, comparisons, things, principles that we could align to and be like, well, what if I pursued her like this? What would
Yeah.
that look like? So, any final words in your contribution, bro?
No, I I think I was thinking about one of the things you said a second ago, and I think just always realizing I think sometimes we have to give people permission to change too,
Oh yeah,
because people change. Like I mean, the my wife's name is Megan. The Megan I married 11 years ago, or even the Megan I was dating even before that, right? Like things have changed. We've had kids, like life has changed. We've moved different places, all that other stuff. And preferences change, desires change, goals even sometimes change, right? Again, hopefully not macro goals, but more of your micro, kind of shorter term goals. And I think that stuff changes. And I think it's so important to make sure to keep open communication and constantly be relaying that communication back and forth. And I'm gonna plug Keston for a sec because he and I have known each other for quite a while now. We hop on calls, but for anybody who's watching this, either now or in the future, Keston's your guy to reach out to learn about how to focus on your family and how to focus on your life and how to get your priorities straight. So make sure to follow him and do all that other stuff. And I know he's got programs and stuff like that to help you with it. So yeah, hit him up.
thank you, brother. Really, really, really appreciate that. And so, in closing out, my people, do remember that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. So, until next time, peace and love.